Hello everyone. Today we will be going through a live demo of MCP server. How MCP server works and what is the purpose of it. The problem. LLMs are blind to our infrastructure. So if you consider an LLM, it doesn't know how to connect to any tool like a Linux server. If I want LLM to connect to this Linux server directly, it doesn't have any context. It has no understanding and not have any context, doesn't have any understanding. So this is a big problem because they don't have any context and LLM cannot directly communicate with your server. So in a traditional sense, like if you ask, check my Linux server performance, check my Linux server performance. In this case, LLM doesn't know how to communicate with this one. So last year, Anthropic come up with a solution called as MCP. MC is meant to provide the context to the LLM to connect to your Linux server. Wow, it seems very wonderful, right? You have a LLM which can perform the troubleshooting and connect to the required tools. Let's say you want your LLM to check all the recent alerts in Nagios, Grafana, Splunk, or any other monitoring tools your infrastructure has. You want your LLM to connect to the monitoring tools and based on the host which is having the alert, perform the required checks. So this is wonderful. Like engineer just types with respect to this one, check this particular Linux, they check this alerts in alerts table, check all the current alerts. Based on alerts which I receive, I can tell to connect to the Linux server associated with the server, that alert. So that is the power of MCP. So MCP is like a MCP is like a REST API. So if you know, like for a developer or a software engineer or SRE, whenever we try to communicate with various tools like GitHub, ServiceNow, or Splunk, or anything, we have a REST API provided to us. So REST API is for the software engineer, and software engineers are the developers. They generally have the context. What exactly the REST API meant for? We have a flow, we have a structure. When we configure, we have endpoint, what endpoint we needs to connect to, what is the purpose, and everything. So we have a REST API to define and connect to this server. But coming to the AI agent, it lacks a context. It doesn't know like how it can connect to a tool Linux server because in if for AI agent we just provide a prompt and that prompt cannot be provided as the complete context. Let's say check the performance of a server, web server. If you type in cloud, cloud doesn't know what is a web server in your infra. It doesn't know how to connect to that web server and check the analysis for this one. So it doesn't have a context. So for context, we need to go with MCP. So MCP just as a protocol which provides the context to the LLM to connect to the target server to perform certain kinds of operations which we request. Now, so how MCP works is like you have a MCP client. So LLM hosts the MCP client. So in cloud, you can call it as connector where we tell which MCP server it needs to connect to. We provide that kind of scenario for that. Then the MCP server has the information how to connect to the Linux server box. So this is a workflow with respect to this one. Now it sounds interesting, right? Now let's get into further on this one. So MCP server, how can I configure that? So MCP server you can configure using a Python library MCP. No, MCP we can configure by MCP library. So that's fine. Like we have an MCP library which can be used to connect to this one. So so earlier we had the MCP server, which was a low-level API. So we need to provide the context. We need to have dense code, how it needs to be connected. We have to provide the transport layer. We have to expose the context. We have to determine everything. So MCP was very much complicated thing because we are defining structure, transport, server objects, and everything. But now the MCP has evolved. We have provided with an option called as fast MCP. So fast MCP. So fast MCP is a decorator. MCP is inspired by fast API, same pattern. You write a Python function, whatever purpose it needs to do, then just add at the rate mcp.tool. It's the tool. Fast MCP reads your function name, your doc string, and your hints and builds everything else automatically. So the coding is very minimum. You just need to initiate the MCP server and then it performs all the things whatever you need. So let's go into the coding aspect of it. So I'll be sharing this GitHub link. So let's discuss about this demo, what we will be doing, what is the requirement for this demo, and how this flow is work. So in this demo, I'll simply show Cloud is connecting to my server and fetch the server stats like CPU, memory, and disk. And based on that, we can question it like, can I host a database server? Can I host Apache server? And I will be sending 8,000 this one. So we'll see how it goes. So requirements, we require three requirements. First is MCP because the cloud needs to connect to the MCP server and connect to the endpoint, my tool, which is my server. And next is PS utility. PS utility is the command to fetch the CPU, memory, Python library. And UVCon is to handle the connection, the asynchronous connections. It can be handled using the UVCon library. And so So what will be the flow of the architecture? So we have a cloud AI, cloud, HTTPS connection, ngrok. So generally the endpoint whichever we need to create, it has to be on HTTPS. So I'm using a third party ngrok kernel to do this. Otherwise, you can configure using SSL certificate, like Let's Encrypt provides free SSL certificate, and you can configure it. For this demo, I'll be using ngrok kernel, which will connect to my my server.py. So it acts as a proxy. So HTTPS, but backend on the plain server, it's running on 8000 port. This is my MCP server where I'm doing the fast MCP as well as PS utility and fetch the Linux kernel metrics. So I can have a Linux server. I can do it check on my local laptop itself, or I can use a remote server. So it depends on the requirements. You can configure. Once you get the concept of MCP, you can implement in various ways related to this. So everything can be done on a free version. So Cloud AI, you can go with free version. ngrok, you can go with a free version. And Python 3.8, it's the recommended version for this. I will be doing this. So you install all the dependencies, whatever server you feel like you are trying to run it, you will be installing all the this one, and you are the install manually all the packages. No, you need to run the MCP server. So to trigger the MCP server, server.py, I'll be running the Python 3 server.py to trigger the script. So what does this script contains? So I have imported the library and have initiated the constructor where I specified fast MCP. It is for server health, the host and agent. So bind to the this particular server on 8000 port. That is it. So I just created a constructor. In the constructor, I have defined a decorator at the rate mcp.tool to define the functionalities. So PS utility to fetch the CPU, PS utility to get the memory, PS utility to get the disk. And after that, there is the main function to call it. This is the transport layer. So to handle the concurrent connections. So this will allow the Cloud AI remote connector to connect to this one. Now it's on plain 8000 port. Now, generally when you go with cloud, it asks for the HTTP. It doesn't support plain HTTP. So whenever you try to configure, which I'll be showing later and during this demo, it needs to be an HTTPS, not an HTTP. So we got the script. We got a server. You can provision a server in any of AWS free server to test this. After that, what you can do is like you go to ngrok site. so that you can proxy your traffic on HTTPS. So I will be doing this testing on Linux OS. So this it provides you. You need to install ngrok. You need to add this auth token and ngrok where your service is run. Here it is ngrok HTTP 8000 port instead of 80, and you can access the domain using this URL. So coming back to our this one, I created an ngrok account. I got it. So I will trigger the MCP server. Then I'll start the ngrok terminal, ngrok HTTP 8000. Then I will forward, this will start the forwarding to the request. After that, you go on to the Cloud AI, go to settings, go to custom connectors and add that particular URL and save it. After that, your connector will be connected to a chart and you can check like what is the current state of my server, check CPU memory, is anything concerning, should I worried about anything else. So all these things can be done with respect to this one. So all these things I'll demonstrate you now how you can configure a server to fetch all the server related metrics. And also in this channel I'll be posting the link where I have the configuration files, everything which explain detailedly what needs to be done. Let's get started with the demo. So I have provisioned a server in Azure. So I'll be connecting to the server. So whatever code I have discussed, so it is here. So I'll just run this code. This will start the application on 8000 port. This is a REST API endpoint we have configured for the MCP server to connect. So what I'll do is like I'll go to connector, add custom connector. And when I say test, and when I try to paste this endpoint, it simply says that the endpoint should start with HTTPS. So what I'll do, I will use ngrok to configure a proxy in HTTPS. You can configure Let's Encrypt certificate. You can do all those stuff. But to keep this session very simple and to explain the capabilities, I'll be using a third-party ngrok which will proxy to the actual this one. So what I'll do is like I'll just log into ngrok. This is ngrok. I'll do a login. I'll say Linux. It's a free version, so no need to worry about that. I'll just execute the command. It will install the packages. Mine is already installed, so no need to worry about that. In case if you run this command, it will install the package. Post that, add the authentication auth token. Our application is running on 8000 HTTP, so you just need to update 8000. Now what I'll do is like I'll copy this URL. So in my settings in connectors, I'll paste that URL. It's test. I'll add the custom configuration, custom connector with respect to this one. So this is a connectors I have involved. So it has get CPU, get disk, get memory, always allow. This is the permission with respect to this one. We can control it, blocked, needs approval. We can put all those things whenever we are accessing with respect to this one. So I'll just ask server CPU check. So it is loading the requested tools, get CPU. So it provided me with a complete analysis. Can I host a DB server of 500 GB? So it provides your concern of RAM, everything. So what is the recommended settings which you needs to add? So this is a small thing we did with respect to this one. So you see, if it's connecting to one tool, just imagine if it connects to a alerting tool like Nagios, get an alert of that particular server or any host. Then based on alert, perform certain actions to another to the actual server. So this can also be done. So this is called as skills. So we define a pre-planned things what it needs to be do, and skill can invoke tools to perform this one. So if you are a company which is managing around 500 to 600 hosts, and for any alert with respect to memories utilization or MySQL DB crash or something like that, you can just configure tools. The tools will be to connect to MySQL DB, check the logs, or perform a restart of service, or do all those things. So you can you can create all those commands or things it can do, and from Nagios it can fetch the alerts. Then with just a single prompt, it can analyze and troubleshoot your issue. So I will be coming up more demos, more scenarios with respect to this one. I'll try to give you live examples, and we will be discussing more about MCP, also skills. So my next session, I'll mostly cover about skills. Thank you guys for watching this.